Okay, so for today, I started them off with y equals x squared plus 6x minus 7. And we talked about vitamin D and that they should check into, maybe check with their doctor at their next doctor visit about maybe thinking about a supplement, because in Minnesota, the angle of the sun is such that you can't get good vitamin D in the winter. Google it if you'd like. And this can be factored, and if you can factor it, you should. So let's have, would you tell me what it factored to?
X plus 7 and x minus 1.
All right. And that, prove it. That's 7x, that's minus 1x. Together that makes 6x. That's exactly what I wanted. What if it had come out to negative 6x? You switch the signs. All right. It's important because some of you are going to say you switch the numbers around. No, you don't. You switch the signs around. And I know some of you are going to say, but it doesn't matter. You could switch the numbers around and it would work fine. Not when they get to the complicated ones, which is what we're doing today. So if you ever get the opposite number than this, you get the opposite of what you want, switch the signs, not the numbers, the signs. Trust me. We'll see it later today. All right, and what are the x-intercepts? Well, the x-intercepts are what makes y equal 0. Y equals, do I want the bottom to be 0? Oh, sorry, this is not a fraction. My bad. This is just me simplifying. Okay, back to this. Do I want this to be 0? Yes, I want this to be 0. So what would make y equals 0? It will tell me the x-intercepts if x was negative 7 and if x was 1. Some people are like, I thought it was a negative 1 and a positive 7. No, it's what makes this part equal 0 and what makes this part equal 0. So those are my two answers. Those are called the x-intercepts. And you have to write them with a point like that. X-intercept is where y is 0. So I put the zeros at the end. That makes sense to you guys? Okay, good. Now, the y-intercept is where, say it, x is 0. So then we can just stick in a 0 here and here. And do you get those first two terms just cancel out? And so it's y equals negative 7. And if you wrote this, I would say, I'm sorry, but that's like a line. Y equals negative 7 on the graph would be a line. So what was I supposed to do for the y-intercept? X is 0. 0, comma, negative 7. All right, and last but not least is the vertex. The vertex, I told you a little equation, x equals, sorry. Anybody finish it? See how y'all forgot it over the weekend? Negative b, does that help? Over 2a. If you forgot that, write it down. That'll improve the probabilities you remember it. Because if you didn't know that 2 seconds ago, then you didn't know it well enough. And you need to do something to help remember it. Activating a different part of your brain, the part that writes, that part of your brain that writes things for you has a better memory. That's one of the reasons people remember stuff they wrote down. Because the act of writing activates that part of your brain, which has a better memory than the auditory part. When I'm talking to you, that part of your brain is not that great at remembering. That's why, and this is really sad, but it's true, it's hard. My mom and dad are both passed away, and I can't remember what their voice sounds like. And it's really sad. I have a recording, though, so I can go and listen to it. But it's been too many years. It's been 10 years since my mom and dad passed away, and it's one of those sad things. But you know what that says about your memory with listening memory? Your auditory memory is really weak. So I tell you stuff, you're going to remember 1/10 of it. So when you write it down, it's not that you're going to review your notes. I know most of you aren't going to. But the act of writing it lights up a different part of your brain. You remember it more. All right, so now negative b over 2a. Well, negative b, here's my equation again. X squared plus 6x minus 7. Negative b is this number, except negative. So it's negative 6 over 2 times a, and a was just a 1. So that's just 2. And that's negative 3, and there we go. X equals negative 3. That's my vertex. No, it isn't. X equals negative 3 is something else. That's the what? Axis of symmetry. Very good. But it is the x of the vertex. If you haven't yet, please go stick negative 3 in the function, and you'll know what the rest of the vertex is. Just put it in the original, or the factored form. I want to put it in there, that's fine. I'll pause for a second. Let me figure out that one. Here we go. Mr. Long, tell me how to finish this thing. I got the x equals negative 3. How do I get the other part?
Plug it into either of the equations. So
I'm going to choose this one. Negative 3 here, negative 3 there. And then this makes 4, and this makes negative 4. And what's that?
negative 16.
All right. Who had negative 3, negative 16? Awesome. All right, good. Now, that's all just review. You were supposed to know that. It's just I'm trying to bring it back. So then how is today different? Well, today is different just because we have nastier factoring. And so here's a typical question. I wrote these down because they're kind of hard to even create. Do you remember that thing where I said, if you get the opposite of what you wanted, you switch the signs around? Try that technique when you're factoring this. 2x squared plus 29x minus 15. Now, one smart kid came up and said, Mr. Server, I noticed that sometimes you factor the number all the way to the front in front of the parentheses, and other times you put it like inside here. So which is it? Well, it depends. Does this one that I just gave you have like a 2 in everything? No. So then you can't put it all the way in the front. Then you have to put it like this. If there had been a 2 in everything, it would be called a GCF, and it would have gone there. But there wasn't, and so I don't. Okay? Now, like I trained you, you do the signs next. You don't try to do the numbers next. You do the signs next. It's either a minus and a minus, a plus and a minus, or a plus and a plus. There's only 3 choices. Figure out the signs. Then, last, you figure out the numbers. And if you put the numbers in and you get the opposite of what you wanted, you have to switch the signs. You can't switch the numbers. If you switch the numbers, you will get a completely different answer. So if you find a way to get negative 29, you're pretty much there, because then you just will switch the signs. All right, I know some of you are going to struggle with this, but there's only 3 choices. No, 2 choices. It's either 15 and 1, or it's 5 and 3. Figure it out. I'll pause for a second. And then the whole point of this would be to factor it so that you can answer these questions. What is the x-intercepts? And what's the y-intercept? Vertex here would be pretty brutal because the negative b over 2a gets monstrous. So I'm not going to ask you for the vertex. I'm going to pause for a second. Let you give that a shot. All right. By now, how many of you knew that there was a plus and a minus? Good. By now, how many of you figured out that a 5 and a 3 did not work? Okay, good. So it must be the 15 and the 1. If you haven't figured it out yet, put a 15 and a 1 in there and try it and then see if it works. So here, I go 15 here, 1 here, and I see if it works. I get negative 30, and I know already that if I'm going to go at positive 29, something's wrong. But I end up with negative 29. Do you get? That's the moment where you don't switch the numbers. You'd switch the signs. Because you're never going to guess right the first time. So you got to know that technique of if you get the opposite of what you wanted, switch the signs around. See, now I'll end up with positive 30x and negative 1x, and together that'll make positive 29x. Okay, cool. Now, there's a few kids who are going to be like, so one of the answers is negative 15, but I don't know how to find the other answer. Then you don't know that you just go 2x minus 1 equals 0, and you solve the easiest little equation in the world. Yeah, this answer is easy. It's negative 15. X-interceptor is where y is 0, so I go like that. And then the other answer, same deal. X-intercept is where y is 0, so that solves to 1/2. Who had them right? Raise your hand if you did. Sweet. The y-intercept is where x is 0. And look how fast this is. In the original, I put a 0 here, I put a 0 here, and I get y equals negative 15. Negative 15. Dang it, I just got it wrong. Because the y-intercept is where x is 0. So 0 comma negative 15. You gotta write it like that. If you just write negative 15, that's a number. That's not a point. That's a point. Okay, why didn't I have you figure out the vertex? Because it's x equals negative b over 2a is the first part, and that's going to be so painful because it's negative 29 over 4, and it would have just been negative 29 fourths, and at least I could have found the axis of symmetry easy, though. You know what I mean? That wouldn't have been that bad. But if I had to find the vertex, it would have been negative 29 fourths over, and then I put that back in the function. That would be disgusting. So we probably wouldn't have any that hard. So that negative 29 fourths would have to go back in here and there, or in our factored form of it. Too hard. Wouldn't do that to you. But at least you could have figured out the axis of symmetry. All right. Here's another one from the top without help. Let's see if you can factor this one. 6x squared plus 22x. That got a little sloppy. I'm going to clean that up. 22x minus 8. Put a y equals in front of it to remind you this is an equation. And of course, like it seems like all math problems, it always comes down to factoring. It's not like I'm making these problems just to make it come true. I've just taught the class forever, and that's why I know that if you can factor it, you should, is a big deal. Pause for a second, let me give that a try. I was asked, what do you want me to find? Well, factor it first, that's the main thing. And then I'd like you to find the x-intercept, and if there's two of them, cool. There's usually two of them, but there can only be one sometimes. The y-intercept, there's only ever one. Sometimes there isn't any, but there's never two y-intercepts. That's just going to be one thing. And then the axis of symmetry. I'll pause while you give that a shot. Okay, here we go. First off, there was a 2 in everything. Those that noticed that found that it was a lot easier then because all the numbers were half as big. And now it factors again, and if you can factor it, you should. And now I'm going to put, oh, if it's only a 4, well, there's not too many choices. It's probably a 4 and a 1 is my gut, because I want to put the 4 here, because then I can make a 12, and then it's really close to 11, you know? And that 1 will probably work with it. And then if I want it to be positive 11x, I'm going to put the plus here and the minus there. Now, some of you aren't that strategic, and you just tried numbers, and they didn't work. If you get way different than what you wanted, you switch the numbers around. Like if I had had the 4 here and the 1 here, you would have to switch the numbers. Switching the signs wouldn't do it. So if you ever get like way different than what you wanted, switch the numbers around. And then you'd have a 1 here and the 4 here. So final answer is the x-intercepts were x equals 1/3. I just wrote that wrong on purpose. And x equals -4. That's wrong. Why? Because x-intercepts have y equals 0. So they're supposed to be like that.
You're still wrong.
Oh, uh-oh. Hold on. Let's see if there's a mistake in the factoring. Double checking. Outside, inside. In the wrong order. X-intercepts are where y is 0. Do you mean like typing this into Schoology? Like, do you want the smaller one first kind of thing? Is that what you mean? Okay. If you have to put the smaller one in first on Schoology, that's a very valid point. Then this would be listed first. Okay. Good point. I didn't think of that. And then the y-intercept is where x is 0. That cancels. That cancels. Y equals -8. Once again, I did it wrong on purpose. that's an asymptote line. Y equals things, those are like asymptotes. You'll learn that later. If y is negative 8, x was 0, comma, negative 8. That's the y-intercept. And last but not least is the axis of symmetry. X equals negative b. I'm just going to skip the formula because I know it. Negative 22 over 2a, which is 2 times 6, which is 12. Should I reduce it? Well, I would just say it this way. If you can factor it, you should. I have an 11 times a 2 here. I'm going to make the 2 negative because I have a choice. And then I have a 2 times a 6. I actually should have made the 11 negative. Because now my 2's can cancel and it's negative 11, 6. There we go. Who had that one right? All right, nice work. All right, let's find your worksheet or Schoology quiz. I think it's actually a Schoology quiz. And there's only one nasty one, and it goes something like this. I'm going to just prepare you for it. 125. There we go. Say you had to factor that. Well, some of you might be thinking, I'll do the difference of squares things. Don't. What do they both have in them? A 5. So factor it out. Take the GCF out first. If you can take a GCF out, you should. And then this will factor so much easier. So there's one like that on your homework. I'm just trying to get you ready for it. Factor out the GCF all the time. Whenever you have really big numbers, think, I wonder if I could factor these down. All right, could you read me numero uno on the Schoology quiz?
Factor completely.
Okay.
F of x equals 3x squared plus 5x minus 2.
And then what do they actually want besides to factor it?
It's a multiple choice. So
Is it x-intercepts or is it just factoring it?
just factor.
Oh, that's easy. 3x and x. Should it be 2 minuses? 2 pluses? Oh, it's a plus and a minus. And then a 2 and a 1. Well, I don't know. Try the 2 and the 1 like this. And then I find that I get negative 6x, and I know already that what's going to happen. I got to switch the signs because I'm getting negative 5x, and I wanted positive 5x, so that becomes a plus. That comes as a minus. There we go. Easy peasy. If they had wanted the x-intercepts, I would have just solved that, made it equal 0, figure out what makes that equal 0, and I'd remember that x-intercepts have y's equal to 0, so, you know, you'd put it like this. There'll be other questions like that. Okay, rest of the time is yours. You know what to do.